The more sedentary you are, the more achy and pain you're going to feel, the more sluggish you're going to feel, the more your mood is also going to be low. Keeping yourself out of the hospital is probably one of the best things you can do. So just because it's sitting at the local grocery store shelf or the local pharmacy doesn't mean that it's always a benign kind of thing. Too much of anything in this world is never a good thing. Because it's at Trader Joe's doesn't mean it's healthy for you.
Have you ever been told that pain, medication, or even surgery were your only options? I tore my ACL 5 years ago, and I was told surgery was the only way I could be active again. Well, today's guest is here to challenge that belief. In this conversation, we explore what it really means to address the root cause of pain, how the body can regenerate when given the right support, and what's actually possible when we stop accepting limitations. Dr. Fawad Mian is a board-certified neurologist specializing in regenerative medicine and non-surgical pain relief. He helps active adults restore movement, eliminate chronic pain, and reclaim their lives without relying on prescriptions or going under the knife. But what makes his work truly powerful is that it's personal. After being told that surgery was his only path forward, Dr. Mian chose a different route to heal his own body. That experience reshaped the way he practices medicine today. So if you or someone you love feel like your body is holding you back, this episode is for you. Welcome to Good is What Makes You Feel Well, Mama Terra's podcast. Each week, we will explore topics that impact our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health through inspiring transformation stories. Here, you will find practical guidance and actionable strategies to apply in your daily life. I'm your host, Ana Rezende, author, health coach, and speaker. I'm here to help you protect your energy, strengthen your well-being, and thrive through life's transitions. If you are a student, a parent, a teacher, or someone who cares about well-being, go to Amazon and check my book, Living Your Best Life in College. Now, let's dive in and discover what really makes you feel well.
Abraço uma pessoa amiga, corre na chuva, escala a montanha, contempla a vista, transcende, levita.
Good morning, Dr. Mian.
Good morning.
Welcome to Good is What Makes You Feel Well.
Thank you for having me on the show today.
That's awesome. For us to start our conversation, I would like to ask you what, in this moment of your life, makes you feel well?
I have to say things that help me a lot, or actually exercise. Exercise on a frequent basis makes you feel good, gives you energy, puts you in a good mood.
Mm-hmm. And what exercise looks like for you?
It can be different things. For me, that will be combination of some weights and cardio. Sometimes those can be classes too as well that mix things up. I actually also have a tonal machine, which is pretty interesting because it's pretty much fast paced and actually helps you work out some of your asymmetries.
Hmm.
And that actually helps you with just some of the other exercises you're doing that are more free weight based.
Hmm.
So it's a combination of many different things. And sometimes, honestly, it could just be even just walking, like on a weekend, just being able to walk outside in the neighborhood and it's kind of nice and quiet and you see leaves fall. Well, leaves are starting to fall a little bit now, but nice weather and everything. So it's enjoyable.
Yeah, physical exercise is something that I think it's a common ground for everybody, right? Because I
Right.
think everybody that engages in a
Mhm.
physical exercise.
Yeah.
have that sense of feeling well, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then even then it's, when you get all that the blood pumping and flowing over to your head, you feel, it's also you're also releasing endorphins and dopamine, everything, and it feels good. So, you're energetic even to start your day, so it actually works better than a cup of coffee.
Yeah. And people usually don't make the connection between why they think better and clearer after exercising or even taking a walk.
Hmm.
But you nail it because the blood flow gets to the brain. So we
Hmm.
think clearly, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Even then, like if don't know if you're familiar with even some of the Tony Robbins events that I've attended, even like online. One of the things that they actually do just to help with retention and focus and energy is they actually have people do different exercises and sometimes dancing in between to get people so their blood is flowing so that they're paying attention because those are long, long sessions that they have. And I think, there's merit to that because you're going to have better retention once blood is going everywhere versus, kind of feeling sluggish and tired and then you're kind of drifting off a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me how your concept of feeling well has evolved throughout your life.
Well, I think initially for me, it was sometimes not feeling well, especially when you're younger, you feel tired, you feel sluggish. Growing up in like the early, the 80s and the 90s, a lot of processed foods make you feel tired. I would eat cereal for breakfast, when I was younger. And you would eat it and all well and good with all the sugar and all of that, but then like within about 2 hours later, you're kind of crashing off of it. I didn't know that back then that you were just crashing off the sugar and that's empty calories. So as time went along and I finally got past started getting into the college phase and started pushing past a little bit of that, I was, more cognizant and aware of how that would make me feel. So I had to start changing my diet. And I really implemented a lot more exercise. Even when I was younger, it was kind of harder for me to run for like long periods of time just because I would get tired and fatigued. That's because I wasn't consuming the right kinds of things. Eventually, it did get to the point where there was a point actually in college where I kind of went a little crazy. I would run 4 miles on a track and then lift weights because I wanted to break past the barrier where I felt like I simply couldn't, I simply couldn't do the things that I wanted to do. And with that, I was like, well, now I'm able to do things that I thought weren't possible. That's kind of grueling just to do that. It's almost like you're training for a sport.
Mhm.
But that's what I did, and it helped transform my body, helped transform my mind, my energy levels, and honestly, I felt fantastic doing that. The only time I could think of, when I was in better shape than that, when I was doing training in New York, because I was always walking and moving around, and then exercising on top of that too as well. So that was probably like the only other time I could think of where, wow, that's a lot of like stuff that I was doing.
If you are enjoying this episode but don't yet understand the multidimensionality of health, I created a free ebook to help you. It's a simple yet insightful few-page book you can read in less than 10 minutes. The ebook link is in the show notes. Now, back to the episode. Yeah, and people often don't value walking as an exercise.
Hmm.
And can you elaborate a little more on walking?
Yeah, no, so walking I think is a great thing to do in general, right? So, even culturally, you see this and even like South Asian cultures and pockets of it where, after dinner they're walking. Walking actually will help burn up some of those calories and actually improve some of the insulin resistance that many of us have too as well. So you're more, with your blood sugar, more or less, you're more fuel efficient ultimately. And once your blood sugars come down, there's less insulin resistance. You're damaging less of your cells and the rest of your body. And you're not running into the problems where you always have to take a bunch of prescription medications, although for some people it may be necessary. But I think walking in itself also has another merit in the sense that you're actually loosening up your muscles, your body, and things will hurt less ultimately by your body moving versus not moving much at all. The more sedentary you are, the more achy and pain you're going to feel, the more sluggish you're going to feel, the more your mood is also going to be low, as opposed to actually getting up, walking around, and moving.
Yeah, that's why I always like to pose those questions and have like doctors like yourself give their perspective on walking because people underrate walking. Walking
Absolutely.
is so, so good. Yeah. Yeah. So you said that during college you started exercising more and
Mhm.
then you felt well during those times. So now how does the exercise routine is present in your daily life?
Well, yeah, when you're married with kids, you find a way to get it done. Just like you brush your teeth and you eat, you figure out a way to try to work it in. So, for me now, it's, going to the local gym, depending on the time, maybe doing some classes there, doing some free weights, doing some cardio versus, also have a little bit of a home gym. And I have a tonal machine where I can do some exercises, have some free weights and a universal machine there. So, I try to give myself as many opportunities to be able to get something done, get some movement in, and minimize excuses and all of that for myself. So for now, it's for me, it's kind of getting it in during the week. Always targeting, I'm always trying to target 5 times a week. Sometimes doesn't always work out that way, but bare minimum 4, 5 is really the target every single week. And you feel better by doing so, ultimately, by doing that and by having a mix of different exercises. So between the weights, the cardio, and all of that, can make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's just creating that habit,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
The habit is so important.
absolutely.
So you mentioned nutrition and your diet and the tweaks that you made
Mhm.
from childhood eating cereal to now. How was that journey of discovering what kinds of foods were actually fueling your body?
Well, I mean, back then when you don't know much about what's going on, it's kind of a little trial and error. So even by the time I kind of rolled into college, I think I started eating more eggs because that's kind of what was available. But it felt like, these are processed eggs that you're eating ultimately. So maybe, although still maybe not the best in the world for you, but at least better than the alternative of eating something sugary or pastry or Danish. But I felt that after, eating eggs and minimizing things like pancakes and waffles and stuff doesn't mean that you couldn't every once in a while maybe consume that. I found that I felt better by having more protein in my diet. And by having more protein in my diet, I also was able to build more muscle. And by building more muscle, obviously I was becoming a little bit more fuel efficient in terms of what was going on in my body. And I simply just felt better with everything. I felt my brain was more clear ultimately
Mm-hmm.
versus being more foggy. And even now you
Mm-hmm.
can see that now I'm even older if if I'm out somewhere and you're eating something that you shouldn't be eating, I can immediately tell how my brain is going to, I mean, within an hour or two, my brain is not going to operate quite as well, and it feels very strange to do that. So you can imagine just cutting that part out. Even like if you're cutting out a lot of the sugar, which I try to minimize sugar and eliminate it as much as possible. Sometimes there are hidden things, especially if you're going to go out and get something you don't know, honestly, everything that's in there. But I can immediately tell if something has too much sugar for me because stuff is just tastes ultra sweet. And they're talking about things that would be commonly, were commonly consumed for long periods of time by a lot of people. But, for instance, like a Coca-Cola, to me now, if I took a sip of that, I would literally spit it out of my mouth because it tastes so sweet. I feel like I'm drinking a bucket of sugar as soon as I sip that. And so, the other thing I have now is also, I've also gotten like a glucose monitor, also just to monitor what I'm consuming too as well to see what the response is. And I think if more people actually had access to this and it wasn't cost prohibitive and people who are non-diabetic, I mean, I'm not diabetic, but if it's like cost prohibitive for these, it's kind of hard to see what's happening when you're consuming what you're consuming because you may notice if you're eating that piece of pizza, your blood sugar, just a huge spike that's going on. Or if you're eating any pastries, same kind of deal, huge spike. But you'll never know until you actually see that. And knowing that your blood sugar can cause damage to the cells in your body, your brain, your heart, your nerves, your organs, maybe people probably would be a little bit more cognizant about consuming these things. Fortunately, in this day and age, I think people are becoming progressively more cognizant, and I think ultimately, I think people have decreased the amount of processed food that they've been consuming. It's still out there, and sometimes they come in fancy packaging too. Just because it's at Trader Joe's doesn't mean it's healthy for you.
Mm-hmm.
Or
So
Whole Foods.
important to
Yeah, it just
tell that.
Whole Foods. So I think people becoming progressively more savvy, I think is helping, but I still think there's a lot more education that needs to go on, and for some people, it's going to be their own personal journey, trial and error, and figuring out what's going to work for them.
Yeah, but it requires this body awareness,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
that is what's so important because from what you said, you do have this body awareness that when you eat or if you sip that little bit of Coke, you have the desire to spit it out just because your body is so clean now that you can feel that it's too much sugar there,
Mhm.
right? So that is the
Yeah.
body awareness that ideally we want everybody to have, right?
Yeah.
To feel the same time that they're eating that donut, how it makes them feel. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. The body awareness is really, really key for health in general, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me more about the glucose monitor that you said you have. Do you use it?
I have it like as a patch on the arm.
Okay, like you use it all the time.
Oh yeah, it's continuous. So I have like a continuous monitoring in terms of what happens with my blood sugar.
That is so interesting because a friend of mine was telling me that she was having some issues and then she went to many doctors. And this one particular doctor told her that she would probably be insulin resistant.
Hmm.
And so she bought a monitor and it
Hmm.
started checking. And then she called me to tell me that after breakfast, because she does eat overnight oats with chia seeds,
Hmm.
and she told me that she had a big, huge spike in blood sugar after eating that. So she called me because she knows that is what I eat for breakfast every day. And she
Hmm.
said, well, you might be having the same problems. So I was really curious. Do you have any tips or any suggestions for people in terms of what to eat, order to eat to stabilize blood sugar?
Yeah, I mean, even then I found that out quickly because you think, unfortunately, oatmeal or oat bran, however you want to spin it, it causes huge blood sugar spikes. A lot of people don't know that. It doesn't even mean the ones that we're not even talking about the Quaker stuff that has like the artificial slow sweeteners on it. It's the regular stuff that you get that's gluten free, whatever it is, you'll just see like a massive spike. Unless, sometimes, if you're exercising a lot, you're going to need some element of carb, but consuming that carb is actually going to be better after you exercise because there are actually receptors in your muscles that actually help uptake the glucose. And so your insulin is not going to work or be pumped out quite as much. And so it's your muscles that are actually doing the work then at that point. But if you start your day with, say, oatmeal, overnight oats or whatever, even if it's got the chia seeds, which is all great for the fiber and maybe a little bit of the omega, your sugar's going to spike. And so perhaps, the better thing would do is, actually having some element of protein that's there, and that's going to actually help with the blood sugar spike, obviously. And it depends on what kind of protein you're taking. You got to make sure it doesn't have a lot of sugar in it or anything like that. So for some people, it can be eggs. For some people that can't consume eggs, it could be like a protein shake that they can do. And that's going to
Uh-huh.
help them stabilize their blood sugar a lot more. Now, if they felt so compelled that they had to eat, oatmeal or overnight oats, you would want to consume a protein and a fat. Fat can come from like an avocado, maybe some olive oil, maybe a nut butter of some sort. and then actually consuming that carb, and that's going to blunt the sugar spike a lot better as opposed to going straight away and just eating that stuff, which is going to do what it's going to do.
Okay, so the chia seeds mixed in and maybe some yogurt and peanut butter would make it better.
It would make it better. It's still not going to make it fantastic. Even then, I've done this with myself, and I've done everything you're mentioning, and I've done all that. And so it still can, literally you would have to eat it in such a way where you're eating the nut butter, then the yogurt, then the chia seeds, and then finally getting down to the oats and then consuming that. So literally you have to think about how you're actually eating it and consuming it so that your sugar doesn't spike.
So
Even
if
then,
you mix it all together, it doesn't work.
it's still not as well as you think it would.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is through a lot of like self-experimentation and seeing it and mixing and matching with that. So for me now it's a lot of protein. Sometimes if I'm exercising a lot, then I might do like a little bit of that, but I would consume it like in that order, literally. It's not something that the average person is going to do in general. But if you have that response from the glucose monitor, then it's going to give you a little better idea of how you can consume your food. And you'll see how it responds based on what you're eating or what order of the food that you're eating it in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for the regular person that doesn't have the glucose monitor, then the protein always first, right?
I would always do the protein first, yeah. Even though that's how I start my day. For me, it's several eggs, and that will be the first thing that I'll eat before I touch anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for that. Yeah, the experimentation is always the best way to do it, right?
Hmm.
So even if I don't have any symptoms of glucose spikes or anything, I might be still harming my health by
Yeah,
eating that way.
sometimes people are just you're not always going to have like a physical reaction to consuming things. I mean, for me, I started noticing these things years ago. And that's kind of why I had very greater self-awareness, but people could be consuming things all the time without really knowing. And they may not get like the brain fog or the sluggishness, or maybe they might notice, hey, I did eat this and I feel sluggish 2 hours, roughly 2 hours later, once everything is processed or whatnot. But yeah, you certainly could if you're unaware. So you'd almost have to pretend if you didn't have a glucose monitor that, look, you gotta, in my estimation, you're going to be better off, consuming the protein, consuming a fat. You can still get carbs from things like vegetables. If need be, you can always do rice. I think is a little iffy sometimes, but if you eat like a little bit of rice after consuming all of that, then like again, you're probably going to feel better versus you go to like a restaurant and you order food and the biggest thing that they have actually there present is the bread and the rice. And we all just start like consuming that. It's like in the wrong order of what you should be doing, essentially. And then you have the protein, you're kind of just nibbling on that like a little bit. But I would definitely start with the protein, making sure there's some level of a fat. Vegetables are still carbohydrates, nevertheless. And so I try to work on consuming those as much as possible over consuming the other, typical things like bread, pasta, rice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great, great. So tell me now about your work. Is it Prolo Healing? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, we actually rebranded to Ascend Regenerative. Uh,
Okay.
and just because we wanted to really capture like what we're doing, like in a nutshell. Because ultimately we want to try to get the most optimal versions of our body and try to help heal and make it better in whatever way possible. That's going to give us like the best longevity ultimately, and then obviously feeling our best versions of ourselves. So for us, a couple of things that we do, we look at things with holistic approaches. One of which also is regenerative medicine.
Mm,
So those, there are a couple of things involved with that. There's prolotherapy, platelet-rich plasma or PRP, and autologous stem cell therapies. And these treatments basically involve trying to help heal the areas of damage with these substances. And they kind of work in such a way. There's different levels of doing all of this, but they work in a way where they help stimulate the surrounding cells to try to help heal the area. PRP, for instance, has growth factors that are released that will help stimulate the area and recruit cells, stem cells, which come from your own body. I'm not talking about the ones that are the umbilical ones, which actually don't have stem cells in them. But they actually also have a more of a robust response and a greater recruitment of everything, and they help modulate inflammation in the area too as well. And there is a propensity actually for the tissue to change too as well. And so these treatments can be quite useful for people who have significant injuries that are nagging. The traditional way of dealing with a lot of these injuries are, okay, you go to the doctor, you get a prescription medication for an anti-inflammatory.
Mm-hmm.
If that doesn't work after a while, you do rest and ice, right? Then ultimately you end up going to physical therapy. Physical therapy doesn't work, then the insurance allows you for some imaging of the area. And then after you get the area image, then maybe you get sent to like a pain specialist, and then ultimately you get steroids into the area, or you take other pain medications, which can be addictive and cause other problems too as well. When there are still the anti-inflammatories, which certainly cause issues in the body too as well. So, this isn't exactly the best way to go because, with the as I say, for instance, the steroids, steroids actually don't heal anything. They make you feel temporarily better at best. Maybe it buys you a few days, for some people, a few weeks, if you're lucky, a couple of months. But it doesn't heal anything. It actually just mitigates a little bit of the inflammation, but doesn't change the underlying injury. It doesn't structurally make anything better. And actually, what it does is it actually ends up causing more damage ultimately. So it's actually toxic to things like cartilage, tendons, ligaments.
Mm.
So even though it may give you like some temporary benefit, it's not going to last very long, and you're just eventually going to get your way to a surgery, which may or may not help ultimately. And so that's kind of what we're trying to combat here. There was actually some research that I had read a little while ago, and they looked at people who had steroid injections into their knee versus people who didn't to see who would go to a knee replacement faster or what
Mm.
percentage. And it actually was the steroid group. There was about like 35 to 40% went on to have like a knee replacement versus 5% for the people who didn't get steroid injections at all. So here you see having a therapy that you think is going to help you actually just hasten the surgery. And just because you have a surgery doesn't mean that things always work out quite so well the way that you want them to. You can still have pain, you can still have mobility issues. I myself had like an ACL repair almost 25 years ago, and that was from playing sports. And I had gotten the surgery and I rushed it. I tried to rush everything as much as I could because I was young and wanted to get it done. Ultimately, I was never the same after that surgery physically and being able to play any sports the way that I wanted to. Felt that things were still a bit unstable. And then 12 years later, I found out that the graft that they had put, which they took from one of my own tendons in my body, didn't really work. So that whole thing was still torn. So
Oh,
it had not been put in correctly, or it was very weakly put in. And then either it just didn't take and tore or retore a long time ago. And
wow.
and so it's kind of like you went through all of that, in the between the anesthesia and the procedure and all that and the rehab. It's kind of like you went through all of that for absolutely no reason.
Mm.
So, and I've seen plenty of patients that have gone through surgical procedures for various other reasons too as well. And I still see, they're still coming in with chronic issues. They may feel a little bit better from the surgery, but they still have a lot of issues that actually affect their mobility. And they may still be in pain because of other pain source generators. I also wanted to mention the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, or the colloquial term for that are things like you may find like ibuprofen, naproxen or Aleve. Celebrex is like a common thing too as well. Meloxicam, they all like come by different names. But these also don't allow your body to heal ultimately. They
Mm.
give you temporary relief once again. That doesn't mean like if you're in severe pain that you couldn't use it for like a very short duration, just so you kind of get past that part. But note that you're still actually impairing your body's ability to heal because chemically that's actually what it's doing. Your body has to go through a reaction where it's actually going to try to help heal itself, and this actually directly impairs that. Plus, there's increased risk of having bleeding, high blood pressure from it. You can also have increased risk of like heart attack too for some of these medications too. It's a black box warning. And they
Mm-hmm.
actually can, like I mentioned, and elevate your blood pressure too as well. And things that people haven't seen, but unfortunately I have seen. I've seen people where they've actually damaged their kidneys significantly from taking these. Some people go into
Yeah.
kidney failure. So just because it's sitting at the local grocery store shelf or the local pharmacy doesn't mean that it's always a benign kind of thing. Too much of anything in this world is never a good thing, no matter what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that is awesome. So the regenerative medicine is just working with the natural healing power that the body has, right?
Right. Yeah. So with PRP, and it's an easy way to understand is that we're actually drawing blood and then we're using a centrifuge to concentrate some of the elements of the blood called platelets. And these platelets actually have what we call growth factors. And these growth factors, if you put them back into the area of damage, can actually help heal the area or the tissues. And we
Mm,
use ultrasound guidance to put them in where they need to go. And by doing so, people have a greater chance to improve. And unlike steroids, it's not like an instantaneous, okay, I feel good after 2 or 3 days. It does take some time for you to heal.
hmm
Sometimes I see people do quite well after 4 weeks, like myself and many others that have treated over the years. It's kind of usually between that 4 to 8 week mark where people really start noticing a difference. For me, I think it was
hmm
kind of closer really to like a 2 month mark. And when I had my own injuries, one day I was noted walking down the stairs and realized I wasn't limping going down the stairs. So it does really improve. The autologous stem cells actually can come from two sources, one of which can be the fat that you have. This is more subcutaneous fat. I'm not talking about visceral fat, which is a topic for another day. And then it can also come from bone marrow, which is
Mm,
extracted from your body too as well. And so these actually have potent stem cells, which can actually help heal the areas too as well. And again, we use ultrasound guidance for that, but these procedures are a little bit more involved than the PRP. And there's a distinction between these kinds of stem cell therapies and the ones that people hear or feel that are controversial. And basically those ones come from like umbilical cells ultimately. And
hmm
it's been, people have looked at actually the cells in these bottles and found that there's actually no stem cells. They're just dead tissue and maybe some growth factors here and there. So those things still remain a bit controversial, but we try to use what your own body has to try to help heal you ultimately. And we may combine that with other modalities of treatment and some nutritional changes and rehab protocols to try to get you to where you need to be.
I was gonna ask that if you had any other interventions with your patients on lifestyle and nutrition. Yes, you do.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about, things to eat, things to consume them. There's a whole route we could really go with that, more on the functional medicine route, ultimately, if need be, to see, well, look, I mean, are you reacting to anything? Is anything causing an inflammation, excess production of like histamine in the body, looking for things like leaky gut and whatnot. So we kind of look at all those things, see what's going to help optimally heal somebody. For some people, they may not want to do all that. They may certainly just give me the treatment or whatnot. But
Hmm
look, I mean, you're still probably you're gonna have a response and you're probably gonna heal to a certain extent. But if you really want the best possible version, we want to look at like many, a couple of different factors for this.
Yeah. So you do work with them like in an integral way,
Yeah, I
looking
think
at everything.
yeah, because I think that's the best thing that and even then through initially years ago when there was a little bit more trial and error with things, we would certainly find that. Even now, I mean, there are other things that are out there that we could integrate too as well between laser therapy, shockwave treatments, and ultimately, I think, there's a little bit more of a movement with something called peptides, which can help with many different things. And so we try to find what's going to be the most optimal way of getting somebody to heal and feel better. And there are always going to be ways to tweak things ultimately. So we really try to work with the individual and trying to get them better and see what their goals are.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's so interesting that you mentioned you had your ACL accident because 4 years ago now, I torn my ACL
Mhm.
and I had to do a full ACL replacement.
Mhm.
Well, my first question for you is it possible to heal a torn ligament without surgery?
The answer to that is yes,
Okay.
you can. And so for like an ACL, just taking that for example, right? So there have been colleagues, and I haven't done this myself, but there have been people who have had like full thickness tears and they've done stem cell therapies. And they've, they've told me that they've been able to get people to where it actually could regenerate and regrow as long as, I guess, there's not too much of a gap that's there. But in terms of, other ligaments in the body, that's something we do all the time. And so we really try to work on those supporting structures. So say for the knee, there's many structures that actually hold your knee together. It's not just meniscus and all of that that's inside. It's stuff on the outside too as well. Stuff that's underneath the muscles and the tissue. And those are also ligaments. And so a lot of those ligaments hold that knee together. And then, a lot of structures on the foot and the ankle, the shoulder too as well, the hands, even in the hip too as well. There are a lot of ligaments and things that are there. And so, the way that I was trained was also to target these things because these are unfortunately the structures in the body that are typically neglected, and with the exception of the ACL, typically neglected by a lot of people in general, which is kind of unfortunate because I think it's a very narrow-minded way of looking at something when you're not noticing that the supporting structures are not being treated.
And I was told that the ligaments don't regenerate.
Well, yeah, so they can
They can.
if you're doing things like PRP and stem cell therapies, even prolotherapy, which is just more of a sugar-based solution. So they can. Again, these are things that are constantly targeted from the things that we do. And even then, they've been able to show that, like over the years, when they started this movement with the prolotherapy a very long time ago, that's actually what was being targeted back then, a lot of the ligaments.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Because, oh, even though it was 4 years ago, it took me a long time to have my full range of motion back. You went through that, you know. It's still today, I can feel the pain. Like if I'm doing certain things, I notice that it's not the same as my other knee. So
Yeah.
I can feel, of course, I can bear the pain. It's not unbearable like it was in the very beginning, but
Hmm.
it's still there.
Hmm.
Is it
Absolutely.
normal?
This is what I see a lot. It's you have the surgery, things aren't quite the same. You may feel a bit better, maybe you have some aches and pains there, but the thing is when you do a surgical procedure on a joint, say for the knee, there's increased risk of osteoarthritis just by going in. You know, my knee is no different with that too as well. And quite frankly, even then, I can tell you that even though I have no ACL right now, it's just scar tissue holding stuff together because I'm still holding out for other miraculous treatments eventually at some point because I didn't want to get the surgery again and make things worse for myself. There's just certain activities I won't do without because I don't want to tear the ligament behind that, which is the PCL. But in terms of things structurally with my own knee, I even noticed years ago, so when they took part of my patellar tendon, which is basically the tendon that goes right in front of your knee,
Hmm.
part of it's the extension of your quadriceps that come down to your tibia, which is the shorter bone in your leg. And they took a part of that. I can actually see the defect on an ultrasound, and it's actually a significant defect. It's not something that's small. So they actually created instability by doing that. And there's a lot of what we call input from that knee to your brain in terms of how you move. But then the other thing that really wasn't disclosed to me was actually part of my MCL,
Mm.
which kind of runs along your meniscus, which are the shock absorbers, actually was damaged too as well, which is actually common actually with ACL injuries. And so I have to go in and do PRP on that, try to help get that better because then it's not going to take much to like eventually cause a problem down the line by moving a certain way because that is going to be inevitable at some point where it just gets worse.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of what you can clearly see actually on the ultrasound really at that point. But again, it's unless it's like completely torn or mostly torn or whatnot, it just got neglected.
I see. So we can avoid surgery
Yes.
doing those therapies.
Yes, yes. That doesn't mean that every single person is going to avoid surgery or dodge it, right? Because there's nothing that's 100% absolute, but we've been able to get many people from having to go into surgery. Even with my own self, and I always give myself as an example where I was like, I've had multiple surgeries for different things. I didn't want any more. And that's, a big part of why I even went into this a long time ago before it became more as popular as it is now. And it's helped allow me to avoid surgery because, years ago they wanted to chop off part of my collarbone. They wanted to shave off part of my heel. The other orthopedic surgeon I went to after I found that my ACL was completely torn wanted to scope it. Said maybe we need to clean things up. I'm like, did you even look at the MRI? So yeah, so I mean these things can get repaired, they can get better with these kinds of treatments. It's possible.
That is amazing. That is amazing. It's so promising. So, is it covered by the health insurances in general?
No, these aren't, these are
Mm,
usually like an out-of-pocket thing. For us, there are ways to do like payment plans and things like that. But I think I would have to say is this in terms of cost, right? So covered by insurance nowadays means something very different than it did a long time ago, right?
hmm.
Medicare is different, obviously, but a lot of insurances, it's quote unquote cover, and we do this even with the neurology practice I'm, a part of. But that may mean that you have like a $10,000 deductible, $15,000 out of pocket max, 20% copay with co-insurance with whatever procedure you're doing. So it's actually quite costly
Oh,
ultimately.
it is. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and the other thing is the insurance companies, the thing we do is like if we're doing a procedure or whatnot, we make after we do the consultation, we evaluate, we make costs very transparent to the person. With the insurance company, they use the guise of quote unquote covered, and you don't really know what your cost is until you get that bill after you've had that procedure. When they're like, oh, I got this bill, and oh, the anesthesiologist was an out-of-network doctor, and so they're really good at it. And people get caught by surprise a lot, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
another thing I also think about too as well is that with these treatments, even though they are out of pocket, they may save you from a surgery and ultimately a lot of downtime or missing time from work, which actually can be costly because you're not generating that revenue really at that point.
Yeah. And then there is no way to compare an invasive procedure like a surgery with a treatment like that. I mean, for
Yeah,
your
no.
recovery, for your body, just not having that massive surgery with anesthesia and all, it's such a huge win, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, just even having all that, it takes a lot out of somebody once they have a surgery. Like even then, I've had stuff with kidney stones and other procedures and my niece. You can feel exhausted just taking 5 steps after having taken, doing the surgery. You feel like you're
Yeah.
not yourself. You're also taking all these pain medications and
Mm,
which actually are impairing your actually healing from the surgery. And then on top of that, you're taking some narcotics if you're given it for different reasons. And then you're out in la la land and it's hard to function really at that point. So it's kind of it can be quite miserable experience for some people. Some people maybe not so much, but I know for me, even at a young age, going through it, it was tough.
it is. Yeah. Yeah. No, putting everything together, it's really an easy way to say no to the surgery. And that is
Mhm.
what we want, right? So the less invasive possible kind of treatment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's definitely what we want to do. And the other thing I would say also about anesthesia is that for the folks who are, getting older, just as a neurologist, I can tell you so many times that people have procedures and then goes through anesthesia. They call me, like in the hospital, and they're like, "Oh, so and so doesn't seem quite so right."
Mm,
And so they're off from the anesthesia, or they may have had a stroke intraoperatively too as well, or they develop blood clots in their legs, which can travel to their lungs and cause problems there too as well. And so, just because you're doing the procedure too as well doesn't mean that just doing all of that is not a benign action because things can happen with this too.
yeah. Yeah. So the best medicine that is prevention, right? No
Absolutely.
doubt about it. Yeah.
No doubt about it, 100%. The better off you can keep yourself healthy and do the right kinds of things. You move, you eat better, work on your mindset. I mean, these sound like all simplistic things, but sometimes it's actually quite hard for a lot of people. And it's not an easy thing, but it certainly can be done. The better off you're going to be, less opportunity to have like medications that can come with its own issues too as well for different chronic medical reasons. And you're going to feel better, and you may only have to see your primary doctor once a year. Maybe you see a functional medicine doctor too as well. Keeping yourself out of the hospital is probably one of the best things you can do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. What a great conversation.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Mian, for people that are listening to us, if they want to know more about your work and maybe read or watch more of your videos and interviews, where they can go to find you.
So there are multiple places. We have our website, prolohealing.com. It's under Sandra Regenerative on Instagram and Facebook as Sandra Regenerative. People can look there as well as YouTube. It's all there, and there's always videos and helpful hints and things like that. For those people who want a little bit, a little more in depth too as well, I actually wrote a book about, I guess during the pandemic, because we all had free time back then. It actually was like an Amazon bestseller at one point. And this book kind of chronicled like my own injuries, and it kind of went into a little more detail about how I went into regenerative medicine, and has stuff on mindset, some nutrition, quick read too as well. So it can be quite helpful and for people who are looking for these things, and then for loved ones, it might be something good to give them. So can always kind of open up somebody's mind a little bit about other possibilities.
What is the title of the book?
Getting to pain free, how to live your life without drugs or surgery.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, what a great title. Perfect. So I'll have that all in the show notes so people can find your book. I'll put the link to for your website and maybe YouTube channel, Instagram, everything, so people can find you easily. Is there anything else that you would like to mention that I did not ask?
Oh no, I mean I think we kind of I think the conversation was great, covered like a lot of topics. So I've encouraged people that look, there are always going to be alternatives out there to try to help you feel better physically, mentally, and then whatnot. And sometimes it just starts with some of the basic things as we talked about on this podcast today. But there's always that possibility to get better. So no one should never feel that there's no hope.
Yeah, I love to end with that because there is always hope.
Yeah,
Yeah, we don't need to feel pain. We don't need to live a miserable life because there's always a way out of it.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Mian.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate being on the show today. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. I enjoyed it too. Bye for now. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode but don't know where your health stands right now or how to start your wellness journey, I've created a free wellness quiz to help you. It will take you just 2 minutes to find out where you are and how to start. The quiz link is in the show notes. See you in the next episode, and remember, good is what makes you feel well.
Corre na chuva, escala a montanha.